Hi, this is Dr. Colbert's broadcast, and this is Kyle Colbert. I'm sitting in for my mom, Mary Colbert, and I'm here with my dad, Dr. Don Colbert. Hey, Dad.
Hey, it's exciting. I got my son here. Very exciting. I'm used to seeing Mary here, and Mary's usually cracking jokes and things, and so just relax, and we're just going to have a good time and explain about autoimmune diseases today.
Well, I may not be as funny as my mom, but I'm going to try and get you through this show, okay? So I'll do my best. But I know we're talking about autoimmune disease, and this topic is very near and dear to your heart, and tell us why.
Well, first of all, what is autoimmune disease? It's when your own immune system begins attacking itself. And the actual definition is it's a condition in which the body's immune system mistakes its own healthy tissues as foreign and attacks them. Now, most autoimmune diseases create inflammation. That's the key.
Heard that before.
But what happens with autoimmune disease, we now know that we can pick up autoimmune diseases early by checking an anti-nuclear antibody screen.
Okay, slow that down. Anti-nuclear.
Yeah, there's a test. Like if a person comes in and usually I pick up autoimmune disease because I check everyone. I check an HSCRP, a high-sensitive C-reactive protein. This is a marker for inflammation. If that marker continually stays elevated or stays elevated for a period of time, a month or two or three, I usually will check a ANA, anti-nuclear antibody screen, or I can do a comprehensive ANA profile where I check a series of ANA tests like double-stranded DNA that rules out lupus, and because if it's elevated, it means their body is trying to develop an autoimmune disease. And one of the hallmarks of autoimmunity is inflammation and pain. With acute inflammation, like if you have a sore throat or a swollen ankle, you sprained your ankle, that's acute inflammation. And the body recruits white blood cells to heal the injury or to fight the infection. But if it's chronic inflammation, that same inflammation meant to heal your body starts to slowly destroy your body by chronic inflammatory mediators being there that literally sets off a chronic inflammatory response that starts to destroy joints, starts to destroy certain areas, like if it's your thyroid that's autoimmune, starts to destroy your thyroid. If it's your joints or lupus, it can be rheumatoid arthritis or lupus, it starts to destroy your joints, or it starts to affect your skin or your kidneys. It's a leading cause of kidney failure. So it just depends on what area of your body, which organs are being affected. But you see, I experienced this firsthand around 1989 or 1990. Now what happened, one day I woke up one morning and I was on fire. I had this rash and it was red. It was on my arms. It was on my forearms, my elbows, my knees. It was on my back. And it just itched like crazy. And I had figured, I said, well, I treated a patient with scabies. This back in 1989. You were like 4 or 5 years old.
And you dealt with this for years. So I remember at a later age, 10, 12 years old, watching you with your shorts and your red knees and red elbows.
Right. Well, it started way back early. And I first of all treated myself for scabies because I'd just seen someone that week with scabies. So I put this lotion on from my chin all the way down and let it dry, and then I washed it off. And next morning it was worse. So I treated again, and finally I said, that's it. And I worked out with a buddy of mine who's one of the top dermatologists in the whole Central Florida area. And so I went to see him, and I'll never forget what he told me. He actually peered down over his glasses were on his nose like this. And he peered at me like this, and he shook his head and he says, Don, I am so sorry to tell you that you have and he emphasized the word, heartbreak of psoriasis. And I said, what? Psoriasis? There's no way I have psoriasis. No one in my family has psoriasis. He says, I don't care. You got it. I've seen thousands of cases, and this is psoriasis. Didn't biopsy or anything. He whipped out his script pad, and he wrote on the script pad, he wrote, Aquaphor Aqua with coal tar.
With coal tar?
Coal tar. This was the most stinky. It was an ointment that was orange, and it smelled just like coal tar that you'd put on a roof or put in a pothole.
Oh, you know? No. You've got to put this on your skin.
I had to put this on my skin. So literally, I stunk. Everything I touched, it turned orange. My car seats turned orange. Our sheets turned orange. Everything I touched was orange. And when I walk in a room, patients would say, what's that smell? And I'd say, I have to tell them that's my coal tar. And they'd look at me and say, hey, is that contagious? I'd say, no, it's just a little psoriasis. You have psoriasis? Can't you clear that up? And so finally, I had a that's it moment because I realized there were certain things, and I want to just go over these because I found out there were certain things that if I did this, the itching improved dramatically and sometimes went away.
And we're talking about psoriasis, and psoriasis is considered an autoimmune
psoriasis
disease.
Is one of the main autoimmune diseases.
So we know, based on what you already said, you had inflammation, then you had that ANA. Is that ANA?
I didn't do an ANA.
You didn't do an ANA, but you're assuming it's probably high.
No, because, I'm sure it was, but my buddy, my dermatologist buddy said, no, you got it, that's it, just do this. Well, I did that, it stunk. I got to the point where it wasn't really helping hardly any. It was turning everything orange or orange yellow. And then it was so stinky that I got sick of it. I got sick of patients saying, explain this. I had to literally explain it to everyone. I had to explain that, hey, I don't have anything contagious. Hey, this stinky smell is simply the medicine I'm putting on. So finally I said, that's it. I'm going to get to the bottom of this. I found out when I was in the sun, it got much better. The itching stopped and literally the rash improved dramatically. When I fasted, it got dramatically better. I would fast for 3 or 4 days, and that's why eventually I wrote the book, Fasting Made Easy and Toxic Relief and all these others. And then I also noticed that when I would get too stressed and I was on call and I'd be awakened during the night, it'd get worse.
I remember that. 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, you get your beeper going off. See, I remember hearing as a kid.
I was on call every night for the first 5 years or so of practice. And so first year it wasn't that bad. Second year on is terrible. Every night I was being awakened, so I was exhausted. And then after that, I started developing sinus infections. And no problem because I had cabinets full of antibiotics.
Now, is sinus infection, is that an autoimmune?
No, it's not, but it set me up for an autoimmune problem. So I had to go back and I had to figure all this out. You see, we now know that most autoimmune diseases begin in the gut with leaky gut or increased intestinal permeability, usually caused from medications such as antibiotics. Well,
which we're all on. We all, especially
exactly.
Every season, cold comes around, flu comes around.
But antibiotics don't treat colds, they treat bacteria, and doctors give antibiotics for colds, and you shouldn't, it doesn't work for colds. So that's why I use supplements now. I used to use antibiotics. I don't anymore because I've seen what they do firsthand, what they did to my body. They set me up for sinus infection. But let me go back. I also found that foods, now again, when I fasted, it would improve. When I ate certain foods, it flared. So I learned that there's certain foods that are like kryptonite to Superman. This is kryptonite and triggers autoimmune disease.
I know what you're about to say.
And so the foods, what was so weird, I crave these foods and I ate these foods every day and many times at every meal.
For lunch, I said every day.
Every day.
As a kid, I remember Polo Tropical. What can I say? I don't know if I can. If I can't say a brand, but I used to love this particular place that served salsa.
And your mom would go get it for me, and she would bring me chicken breast, and she would bring me salsa and beans and a roll, and I would eat that for lunch. And she'd bring me a big bowl of salsa. And when I was finished with my chicken, I dipped my chicken in it. When I was finished with that, I'd take that bowl of salsa, I'd drink the whole thing. Now, this salsa had tomatoes and peppers.
And it was spicy. You would sweat.
Oh, yeah,
you
absolutely.
Loved the spice.
And also what I ate back then, I didn't realize, was cheese. I used to love cheese. I then figured out, because I did a food allergy test. And with this food allergy test, I found out I was highly sensitive to gluten, off the chart to gluten, but also to tomatoes and peppers. And that cheese, my body didn't like it that much. Now, it just so happens when I stopped eating cheese, guess what happened? The sinus infections went away.
Started clearing up.
And so I didn't have a problem with sinus infections when I got rid of the cheese and a lot of the dairy. I was a dairy addict.
How long did it take when you removed that from your diet, the cheese or the dairy, that you started seeing?
Oh, I saw within 4 to 8 weeks.
4 to 8 weeks.
Improvement, dramatic improvement. And then when I put these other things, so first I had to heal my gut. Now back then, we're talking about 1990, 91, all I had back then was these probiotics that had 1 billion That was a lot, considered a lot back then if you have a billion colony-forming units. So I was taking like 5 to 10 of those billion colony-forming unit probiotics.
And there's only a few strains back then, too, wasn't there?
Right. We just had mainly bifidobacteria, lactobacillus bifidus, and bifidobacteria, acidophilus and bifidus. So what I also did is I started taking glutamine because glutamine is really good for healing leaky gut. But the most important thing is removing my kryptonite, which was gluten, the worst, nightshades, tomatoes, potatoes, peppers, eggplant, paprika. I loved them. See, you say, where's paprika? Well, it's that orange stuff on deviled eggs that your son, Braden, loves. He loves deviled eggs. But it's also in chili. It's in nachos. And I was wondering, every time when I ate chili, I would break out horribly. And so I cut these out, and then also I cut out the cheese and the dairy, and also beans. Beans are high in lectins, and lectins are these proteins that are especially in beans, peas, lentils. They're in the skins of peppers and tomatoes, and it's in paprika. And what these lectins do, they're proteins that protect, they're defense mechanisms of the plant against pathogens, bacteria, viruses, fungi, and predators. They protect them because animals get sick.
Oh, wow.
So when we eat these New World veggies, our bodies and immune systems are not prepared when we eat these every day, and it starts to create inflammation, usually in the gut. And what gluten does now, gluten, and I'm going to talk about this later, but gluten is the protein, and realize wheat contains 23,788 different proteins, any one of which can create inflammation in the gut. But the worst are gliadin and glutenin. Now, again, this is...
I haven't heard of it. Gliadin?
Gliadin. G-L-I-A-D-I-N. It's a protein in wheat. That's the most inflammatory, and glutenin. Those are the worst two.
Because we hear about glutenin, because that's really, that forms the gluten.
There's gluten, but gluten contains 23,788 different proteins.
Oh, wow.
The most inflammatory are gliadin and glutenin.
So we should be gluten and gliadin-free. We should be eating gliadin-free foods.
Well, we should be eating gluten-free foods. Or if you choose bread, if you're a bread lover, if you get fermented sourdough bread, almost all the gluten is taken out. It's the yeast in the fermentation process gets rid of most of the gluten.
That's what I had this morning.
Which is absolutely amazing, yes. So that's what we have my grandson Braden on to help him. But anyway, let me just go on, because what I did, I literally realized that stress was killing me. And that's why I wrote the book years ago, Stress Less. And this is pretty much what I used, these godly principles to get rid of my stress.
What is ironic, though, because I can state this because I was in the house with you at this time.
Right.
Is you were highly stressed, you were on call, you were working, I don't know how many hours.
12 hours a day. I know.
And you had your own medical practice. And you were writing books. So ironically, you're writing a book about stress, which actually created a little stress.
Yes. And I had just bought a new home, a new car, and opened a new practice. It's just all this stress. And I was on call. I was still taking calls at the hospital, at the ER.
It's amazing.
And I was doing a call with patients every night. So you know what I did? One of the things that saved me, literally, I stopped taking call.
Yeah. And some people have to realize that sometimes the answer is nutritional and sometimes it's just making life a little more simple. That's what it sounds like to me.
Exactly.
Just give yourself a little margin in your life, a little space to breathe.
Right. I also learned back then, we didn't know about vitamin D back then in the late 80s, early 90s.
We love vitamin D.
But then I realized the sunshine helped me so much, but sunshine produces vitamin D. And so my vitamin D, when I checked it back in the early 90s, it was real low. It was less than 30. And so now I keep it in that sweet spot between 50 and 80 nanograms per milliliter. And that keeps your immune system happy, and it helps prevent autoimmune disease. That's a major thing I did was I had to spend time in the sun, but I had initially a low vitamin D3 level.
Can we consume foods that give us vitamin D, or can we just get it
You can't get enough.
from the sun?
You can't get enough in the foods. It's in vitamin D fortified milk and things like that. So usually it's not enough. All they put in a multivitamin is about 400 international units. I personally take about 5,000 units a day, and I keep my level around 70. And so that's ideal for me.
And you get your blood work checked.
Oh, I check it every.
And the number comes out, and
Yeah.
you're looking for that number from 50 to 80.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, I check my blood every 6 months. Now, let me tell you a little story that just happened on my blood, because my blood's been pristine, really good. I check that inflammatory marker. If it's high, I check my ANA levels. My ANA's fine.
And your inflammatory markers of CRP.
CRP. Now, what just happened, let me tell you a little story. It just happened, because this is what I'm prone to. I'm prone, if I love a food, I'll eat it daily. Now, I found this new restaurant, in Lake Mary, Florida, that I love. And I don't want to mention names or anything, but it's a natural restaurant, gluten-free. So I said, oh, it's so healthy for me.
So you do it every day.
So I started eating this every day during the week. And I had my girls order it and then send it to the office. And so what happened, I just recently, I'm talking about 2 months ago, I checked my blood, and my HSCRP is supposed to be less than 1. It was greater than 15. I freaked out. I said, what is going on?
Oh, wow.
I have an autoimmune disease. And I started itching in my back. My lower back is the sign that I have. And so I said, mind if I don't have psoriasis. I don't have anything. And so I said, what is going on with my body? And so I started analyzing what I was eating. I said, I'm going to do a food allergy test because if I can't figure this out. But I have a way to check foods using kinesiology, and we have a nutritional computer that is able to check food sensitivities and food allergies. And lo and behold, I found that I was highly sensitive to almonds. I said, almonds? I'm not eating almonds. And then I realized, oh my gosh, I'm eating almonds at every meal.
Oh, wow.
Almonds or pecans, they're putting in my oatmeal.
Oh, wow.
I'm getting almond-crusted chicken that's baked in the oven every day for lunch. And at night, I'd found a little healthy, low-carb, low-glycemic snack that was a chocolate brownie made with almond flour. And I loved it every night because it's just perfect. It was delicious, and Braden loves it too, by the way. But I said, oh my gosh, I'm eating almonds at every meal. I cut the almonds out. I checked my HSCRP like 2 weeks after that. It had dropped from greater than 15 to less than 0.5.
See, and that's what's a challenge, because you're sensitive to almonds, didn't know you were consuming almonds, but almonds were being baked in the bacon that you were eating at a restaurant. Is that what you said?
No, it was in the chicken. It was almond-crusted chicken. It wasn't fried chicken. It was baked. And it had almond crust on the top instead of fried chicken.
So you really have to know.
So I said, this is so healthy. And there's no gluten.
It sounds healthy, and for most people it probably is.
But I'm going to tell you something. You know what almonds also contain that most people don't know?
What's that?
It's one of the highest foods in glyphosate, which is Roundup, which is a weed killer that wreaks havoc on our gut.
Is that because they're spraying to save the almonds from getting...
Exactly.
Okay, fungus.
So again, we'll talk about that later.
Okay,
anyway, that's simply what I did, and that's how I overcame psoriasis. And since then, I've helped thousands of patients with autoimmune disease, because it doesn't just work with just psoriasis. It works with almost every autoimmune disease. Now, the most common autoimmune diseases, there's 10 key ones, and the most common would be lupus. I see a lot of lupus.
Lupus, I hear a lot of lupus.
The earlier we catch it, the better off they are. And I'm going to teach you how, and I've helped hundreds, if not thousands, overcome.
What is early for you? If a patient says, I've had lupus for 5 years.
Well, even earlier the better.
Okay.
Because it's kind of like lighting a fuse. When you light a fuse on a stick of dynamite, you know, the earlier you can put that fuse out, the better off you are. When it explodes in your body, it's affecting your kidneys, it's affecting all the joints, it's affecting your skin, then it's just got a foothold on your system. It can still be reversed, especially one thing I didn't mention. Back in the 90s, what I didn't know back then was the healing power of God's Word. And so again, in His Word, it tells us that, you know, He took our infirmities and bare our sicknesses, and that by His stripes we are healed. And we were healed, and literally as part of His atonement is not only salvation, not only deliverance, but also healing from every disease. But we have to grab onto that by our faith, and literally, but also we have to usually fast our body. Now I live a fasted life. And so when I do this, literally the Spirit of God, and what's amazing is when I was first, when I started getting itching a couple of months ago, and I told my wife, she said, I just heard the Holy Spirit say that it's the almonds.
Oh, wow.
She had a word of knowledge. I said, almonds, that's crazy. I've never seen one allergic to almonds or sensitive to almonds. Well, you know what? I went and checked it, and she was absolutely right.
Wow.
She received a word of knowledge Almonds. She said, I just heard it. I just heard the Holy Spirit say almonds. So again, the faith principle is critical too. So you have to put it all together. And that's what we want to do. Put it all together because every autoimmune disease can be healed. But there's certain things we need to do. And there's certain things God will do if we exercise our faith. And that includes speaking healing over us, because literally 2,000 years ago, Jesus, part of his atonement, when he went to heaven and presented his blood in the heavenly holy of holies, he blotted out all sicknesses. He bore every sickness and every disease, including every autoimmune disease. And we get a hold of that literally we were healed 2,000 years ago as part of our atonement. And we get a hold of that and believe it in our heart, confess it with our mouth. We're not only saved, we're also healed. And that's a major part that Christians need to get a hold of. But that's what I did. Now, getting back to what else we need to talk about is there are over 100 different autoimmune conditions. Just a few are lupus.
There's over 100.
Over 100.
So there's 100 conditions that are like psoriasis, but manifest in different ways in our body.
Yes, depending on what organ they're attacking. Now, again, what's interesting, they're increasing at warp speed, autoimmune, since the mid-1990s. They've been increasing. I'm going to tell you why shortly. But the most common are lupus, Sjogren's syndrome, which is dry eyes, dry mouth, because this autoimmune condition affects the glands in the eyes that produce tears and the salivary glands that produce saliva. So people more and more are getting Sjogren's, or dry eyes, dry mouth, as well as rheumatoid arthritis increasing dramatically, psoriasis, like what I had, psoriatic arthritis, which psoriasis affects your joints, degenerates your joints, as well as Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. Type 1 diabetes.
I hear about ulcerative colitis all the time.
It's increasing dramatically. And mainly Crohn's, it comes from a bacteria, Mycobacterium avium paratuberculosis, or MAP. And many of these people have this bad bacteria in their gut. And it literally sets the stage and lights the fuse for autoimmune disease and Crohn's.
So for Crohn's patients, would they show a high ANA as well?
Many times they do. But they have, it's interesting, the Crohn's have this other marker called the ASCA, ASCA marker.
Okay.
And the ulcerative colitis has the ANCA, ANCA marker.
Okay.
So it's interesting. Now, type 1 diabetes, multiple sclerosis, where literally the body's own immune system starts to attack the myelin sheath. The myelin sheath is like the rubber coating of a wire. Well, that's the coating of the nerve, the myelin sheath. And when that happens, you start getting all these weird sensations throughout your body.
Is there a way to rebuild that sheath?
Well, again, there's a strong relationship between MS and mercury. And we got to get rid of the mercury.
Shellfish.
No, mercury's mainly in fish, big fish like sea bass, ahi tuna, shark, marlin, the sailfish and things, the big fish that we eat. I'll get into that a little bit.
All right.
Okay, also there's scleroderma, there's Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Those are the most common autoimmune disease. And again, what's interesting is these ANA antibodies, these are literally, we're seeing more and more, the higher levels of these in more patient populations. They're increasing tremendously in males, number one, also in non-Hispanic whites, as well as adults 50 years of age and over, and in adolescents. These autoimmune markers, as ANA levels, are increasing in these subtype groups. Now, right now, according to the American Autoimmune-Related Disease Association, which is a leading authority on autoimmune disease, more than 50 million Americans have one or more autoimmune diseases.
50 million.
This is exploding, guys.
Yeah, that is.
It's absolutely exploding. Now, this is the key, is 75% of those affected with autoimmune disease are women.
75%.
75. 3 out of 4 people with autoimmune disease are women. Now, why does autoimmune disease affect women more than men?
Yeah, why is that? What is that?
It's real simple. They figured it out at Stanford University. They did a study, and they found that there's a molecule made by one of the X chromosomes. See, a woman has 2 X chromosomes, and by the way, a woman, well, you can dig up the bones of a woman from 1,000 years ago or 10,000 years ago, and you can see if those bones, if that was a woman or a man, because she has 2 X chromosomes.
That's amazing.
A man has an X and a Y. It just so happens that a molecule made by one of these X chromosomes in every female cell can generate antibodies to a woman's own tissue. it makes it more prone. Women with this X chromosome makes them more prone to autoimmune diseases.
But why?
It's just because this molecule on the X chromosome. They don't know why. They just say this is what's happening.
They don't know what's triggering it.
They don't know.
Wow.
But I'm going to tell
Hormones,
you what.
maybe?
What
you think? Okay, you've got an idea.
I'm going to tell you what. I know what's causing it, okay? Number 2, there are certain female gut bacteria that increase the risk of autoimmune disease, such as the Enterococcus gallinarum is associated with lupus. But there's also others like ankylosing spondylitis is a painful back condition, autoimmune condition that's due to certain bacteria like Klebsiella. There's also Graves' disease and Hashimoto's that's associated with a bacteria in the gut called Yersinia.
Heard of Hashimoto's. That's related to the thyroid too, isn't it?
Yes, Hashimoto's thyroiditis is the most common cause of low thyroid, but this bacteria many times lives in the gut, pathogenic, called Yersinia. So that's why you have to do a microbiome test of the gut to see if that bacteria is there. You got to kill that baby with natural means, or else it's going to continue to do its dirty work. And then there's others. There's psoriasis, and this is what I had. I didn't realize it, but looking back, there's 3 different organisms associated with psoriasis. There's first of all Strep pyogenes, Staph aureus, and Candida albicans. Back years ago, back in the 90s, I checked for Candida albicans, and I had it. I eradicated it with nystatin. And that's one of the key things I use to clear my psoriasis.
But also strep and staph?
Yeah, strep, staph, and Candida albicans. That's a yeast.
Wow. So people that are prone to strep or staph infections.
Yeah, can also have psoriasis.
Interesting.
So you got to kill those bad boys in the gut, okay? And not usually with antibiotics. Now, again, there's also viruses that trigger autoimmune diseases. And this is what's fascinating. One is Epstein-Barr virus. Epstein-Barr, the monovirus, is associated with lupus, MS, multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis, type 1 diabetes, celiac disease, and inflammatory bowel disease. Cytomegalovirus is associated, that's another virus similar to mono, associated with lupus, rheumatoid arthritis.
So we're talking about mono from childhood mono.
Yeah, right.
What, you drink someone's bottle of water when you're a kid, and then you get mono.
It can set the stage for autoimmune disease.
Wow.
One of the worst is COVID. Listen to what
Wow.
COVID is amazing. COVID increased the risk of rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, MS, spondyloarthritis, vitiligo, Crohn's disease, and alopecia. That is amazing, isn't it?
That isn't.
So again, what we're finding is that these viruses literally set the stage, and they invoke an autoimmune response in so many people. So it's critical to know this. So there's testing, I'm going to be talking about in another show, that you can get tested to see if you have these viruses. There's others. I can go on and on. There's hepatitis C that's associated with lupus and rheumatoid arthritis and Sjogren's syndrome. There's influenza, even the influenza vaccine, the flu vaccine. The flu vaccine is associated with Guillain-Barré, an autoimmune disease that affects the nerves, attacks the nerves. It also can cause acute disseminated encephalomyelitis, or inflammation of the brain. It can also cause chronic demyelinating polyneuropathy. So again, this is from a vaccine. So again, what I do is I use my vitamin D. I get that level 50 to 80 nanograms per ml. And guess what? I haven't had the flu in decades.
Wow.
And again, I use the Word of God as my medicine. So we're out of time.
Yes.
Again, that's only 2 pages. I've got 10 pages.
Well, listen, this show, just to summarize everything, Dad.
Sure.
We've got over 100 autoimmune diseases.
Yes.
In this program, we talked about what those autoimmune diseases are.
Yeah.
We haven't talked yet about what you think is the reason behind some of those.
Viruses and bacteria are a major trigger.
And you're also going to tell us
the number one, but we got many more.
And then also what they can do for it. So stay tuned. If you want to support us and support this program, you can always look at my dad, Dr. Colbert's books.
This is the key book for autoimmune disease. It's called The Healthy Gut Zone. And that literally starts to repair the gut, because most every autoimmune disease starts in the gut.
So you can get this book on Amazon. You can get it on the website at shop.drcolbert.com. Stay tuned for Dr. Colbert's broadcast. We'll see you next time.